Is it over? It's not over yet.
But
Your workshop?
I think it's over.
Okay. So, what was your take on it? How'd they do? Or, you know, it was,
Spaces were great. I mean, really.
how'd it go for you?
Went fine. It was friendly.
But nobody's really had much.
People tried. It wasn't. Usually you can feel if it goes aggressive or not.
Mm-hmm. Have you done that before?
I do it with my students actually. A lot of not exactly like this, making the lists. But we watch the same movie and we chat about it, and it's kind of unavoidable to do with your students, at least for me. Mela asked me to go tiny steps by tiny steps. It's all going to be very informal, so whenever you have a question, please interrupt and see if you can steer it one way or the other. And I think everything is meant mostly to make you think about your own identity more than anything else. Sex is a classification the doctor will give you at birth. Gender is something you identify over time, and it's fluid, it can change. How you perform your masculinity or femininity, or a mix of both. And then, how do you name it?
This morning from you, I think, and from the discussions we've had, it's also about rejecting or at least questioning first impressions based on appearances.
Right, and don't you think that gender is fluid? It's not static?
For some people it's fluid, for some people it's not.
So if you put a label on it, you're putting a
you can
stake in
change
the
your label
sand.
anytime you
Yeah,
want.
but I think that all these labels, for us, who don't know all the labels, I think trying to pick which label you are constrains you.
Except
Because
that
maybe you're many of those labels.
they're not just labels. It's they might come off as such, but it's really different performed identities.
Initially, we started thinking about surveillance, mainly because it's something that comes up continually in the kinds of classes that we teach and the kind of issues that we deal with in schools of architecture and interior design, and in being in New York in the post-9/11 world. But as we started to explore issues of surveillance, it became difficult to, everything we started to investigate seemed really cliched. And so as we started to think about it, we realized that surveillance was very much predicated upon issues of identity. And that if we assume that identity is, in essence, a kind of set of properties, that's what surveillance is all about. So the presentation that we're going to do is basically our attempt to map identity from space to digits, kind of increasingly going down in scale, and hopefully, almost in a kind of phenomenological sense, allow us to think about the kinds of things that construct our identity, whether we've constructed it ourselves.
How do we define and market ourselves through our clothing? And within this week, like, how does that represent our identity and what we're saying to those around us? What statements are we making through our clothing? How do we effectively use our body as a communication tool? And how do we create interaction between our personal appearance and others?
You connects girls.
They make a certain number available on the date, which they don't make available
This is one.
Like critical.
Looking to find a Ralph Lauren.
No, it was you have to buy that.
I wanted to have a visual presentation of the historical aspects of identity. And a lot of those fit into the current world of graphic design. Both personal identity and also collective identity. And so we just took a little walk through history and dealt with a lot of those issues by showing how people did it. Your home has meaning, both public and private. Let's explore the visual aspects of what identity is, how we use it, what it means, how we create it, how we read and decode it. I had two interests. One was giving historical background that might connect to what we were talking about. And the other thing had to do with my feeling about where we come from, or what we consider to be our home, is, I think, an important part of our identity. And I found, particularly in speaking with Margot, a similar idea about, she has different words to explain it, but I called it a sense of place. And I think there are things about the place that we consider to be our home, or we have some mystical connection. So the workshop activity was to get people to make some lists of things that had to do with metaphors and descriptors. And then I thought, as a good outlet for most of these people who are designers of some sort, they could make some things that stand for their ideas, and that's all they are. But it allows us to take our ideas and give them some form.
Yeah.
As a maker of work, design or art or whatever, there's a particular density we work with, or rhythm, or line quality, or color, or a particular way that you deal with space, and also could be time. How does that relate to possibly your connection to geography? It becomes place also with reflection of experience, which includes memory, which, as we can imagine, takes reality and imagination together. And I think as artists and designers, we work very much in the imagination, and therefore I think it's more accessible, the idea of place, and we're visual.
We've spent so much time looking at ways that we would make ourselves individualized, and I thought it might be interesting to then turn it around and look at the collective and look at ways that individuals fit into society as a whole. And so what I started doing was mapping out ideals of beauty, and so there are certain rules to faces that make things beautiful, certain proportional rules, things like symmetry.
It became, kind of really a design issue of how do you get really close and loiter for an hour and stay 8 feet away from the person you want to shoot, and then really figuring out the logistics of exactly how it takes place.
Did you get about security? Any security issues?
Well, each one kind of was a different security, but really the bigger problem is in your head. I mean, because the more you did it, the more paranoid you got. The direction of this work was somewhat inspired by this French war photographer named Luc Delahaye. Luc had done this book called Winterreise.
We really didn't feel comfortable proclaiming some prophecy on, where technology was headed or any of that. And we really weren't interested in the details of the technology. We were more interested in that human-digital interaction. And this was sort of our basic premise, that asking questions, both as producers and as consumers, may be a way to ensure that the future of interactivity is both one that we want and one that we need.
Who are we really? And that's rarely something that we're asking of ourselves, and deeply. I'm talking about deep questioning. One is about, says consciousness is the ground for all being. So if that were true, then why aren't we focused more on the idea of consciousness, developing our consciousness? The opposite side is matter is the ground for all being. During this process, I'm participating and I'm listening, and I hear certain things, and this whole theme of identity begins to frame itself. And it's what partly drew me to this meeting, because
That's not the idea.
Well, maybe it is. I don't know. I was thinking it should be time.
I thought they were practical. That would have been my guess.
I've made observations, but I'd be more interested to see how you feel of that experience.
I have to say, after you spoke, I really wanted to kind of ask some critical questions of your work, but actually I much preferred making critical questions. It was much more enjoyable to turn that energy into making rather than talking.
Good.